السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. ونصلي ونسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. آمين. We are continuing our series of lectures about Tawheed, and we finished the going over Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. We explain what does it mean and how it reflects on our lives, and we mentioned before that there are that scholars divided Tawheed. It's one thing. It's not three or two or anything. It's just the whole Sharia and Aqidah are one thing contained in Quran. There is no Sharia and Aqidah, even though the Aqidah didn't actually get into the Islamic writings and thought except later on. So it is only the Quran and the Sunnah, and but for just the purpose of studying and dividing things into subjects because of what happened throughout our early history, scholars needed to divide and study things, the nitty-gritty of Tawheed, because the loss of language, loss of understanding, like Sahaba used to understand, and Tabi'een. So that's why. So some scholars said it is two types of Tawheed, Rububiyyah and Uluhiyyah, which is Rububiyyah, and Uluhiyyah is al-Ibadah. And some people said no, it's a Rububiyyah, and divided Rububiyyah to a Rububiyyah and al-Asma' wa Sifat. And then the third one is Tawheed al-Ibadah or Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. So we covered Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, and we covered the definition of the main phrases like al-Ilah, al-Rabb, al-Ibadah, al-Deen, al-Taghut, and we saw how this actually make us understand this part of Tawheed that has to be embedded in the subconscious and the conscious of every Muslim, some way or another. It doesn't have to be at the level of detail, but it has to be understood and to take it in and know how it affects a person. Reflection on the universe and everything, and the relationship between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the Asma' wa Sifat, which is the second part, it's very important because first of all, the mushrikeen of Quraysh used to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَئِنْ سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَسَخَّرَ الشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ لَا يَقُولُنَّ اللَّهُ. If you ask them who created heavens and earth and subdued the sky, the heavens and the sun and the moon, they are going to say Allah. So they know Allah, and they know that Allah is the one that they have to go to and ask as the power that is above every other power. They knew that part. حديث رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم when he asks أعرابي كم من إله تعبد قال 6 في الأرض وواحد في السماء قال فما الذي ترجو في سرائك أو ضرائك قال الذي في السماء. So they knew some of the sifat of Allah, and they knew the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They didn't know Rahman. They didn't know most of the names that of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they didn't know. And hence they didn't know the attributes, because the name and the attribute are combined together. The name carries an attribute mostly in the Arabic language. Names carry a meaning. So names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala carries the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Islam came and completed the knowledge of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His attributes. The attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is how we understand and relate to Him and to submit, and because we have to understand that every attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He reflected it at some degree in his creation, like Ar-Rahim. So He is Ar-Rahim. He gave us Rahmah. So we see the Rahmah. We see how the animal with their, even the animals with kids, with their little kids, how they do with their kids with the Rahmah. How humans with their little ones. Al-Malik, even Al-Malik, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the owner. He claims the ownership of everything. He owns everything in heavens and earth. But part of it that we know what ownership is, and we own stuff, and we strive to own, and so you even find the kings. I mean, they call it a king. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Malik al-Muluk, the king of kings, because no king has ever, the point is we cannot imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except through His names and attributes. It's very hard for humans to grasp Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why in the hadith, فكروا في آلاء الله ولا تفكروا في ذاته فتهلكوا. Think of the bounties of Allah and the miracles of Allah. Whatever Allah exposes to us from His work and His existence, but not Himself, because otherwise we are going to be we will go like insane. We can't understand it. That's why the philosophers, all the philosophers, they went astray. Why? Because they put aside the wahi, the revelation completely, and they started to think with their own brain. And the brain has a capacity, and this capacity, no matter how IQ you have, no matter how smart you have, you are talking about the being of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's beyond everything. That's why they went in circles and circles and circles and never got to the bottom of it. They never succeeded. They came back to where they started again. So the only way to tackle this subject of who is Allah, how do understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is through revelation. That's the only way. Sometimes we say, well, you see the shaitan come to oneself and say, but how is Allah, how is this, how is that? I mean, he's creator. What was before him? What are the limits of his power? Is there a limit to his power? How can he do this? It's useless. It's nonsense. We are not made to understand these things. The brain is not created to grasp these things. We only understand the attributes of Allah, which is embedded in His holy names. So that's why Asma wa Sifat, in order to know the complete, all what He reveals to us. Of course, we cannot add or take away from Asma Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like some people call Allah al-Muhandis, the engineer of the universe. That's not right. It's not right. You cannot say that, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't call Himself al-Muhandis. There are names in Quran. العزيز المهيمن الجبار المتكبر الخالق الرازق له الأسماء الحسنى بالآيات. كل هذه الأسماء، هذه الأسماء. But other names we cannot say that. We cannot call Him whatever He didn't call Himself. Maybe there are names and attributes we don't know about, but we say, we worship you, Allah, with the names you told us about, and we know, and what we don't know, what you keep for yourself, what you convey to us through your messengers in your books. That's what we follow, because there is no way that the brain will ever attain anything other than what the reality and the ذات of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why He said, لا تفكروا في ذاتي فتهلكوا. Don't think of my being, myself, because it's beyond everything. I'm beyond everything, and He subhanahu wa ta'ala is really beyond everything. We don't know. We just don't know. It's too big for us. So that's where the problem of, like we said before, these two big problems or issues that created al-bid'ah and slipped from bid'ah ila sometimes some firaq ila al-kufr, through these two big issues, al-iman and al-asma' wa sifat. So al-iman, we are going to talk about the issue of iman later after we finish Tawheed, inshallah, but now we talk about al-asma' wa sifat. Al-asma' wa sifat, we find that there are some sects who went astray in understanding al-asma' wa sifat, asma'illah wa sifat. And the main division was Ahl Sunnah at one hand, and then al-Mu'tazila at the other hand, the other end of the stick, and then al-Asha'ira tried to play smart and stand in the middle. And let's talk about why this happened to start with. This happened actually because they couldn't, because the al-Mu'tazila, we know that they said that al-aql, intellect, is the main power that we have to rely on. and they call them now they call al-aqlaniyun, you know, the people of intellect. And why? Because they started off by trying to refute the philosophies that was translated from the Greeks. And in order to do that, they studied the Greeks, and it affected them. And because their heads, the head of Mu'tazila, Wasil ibn Ata or Amr ibn Ubaid, in the early beginning, they were not really fuqaha, and they were ajam, and they didn't know better, so they couldn't understand the methods of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. They couldn't understand the methods of understanding of Sahaba, and they said we have to rely on al-aql in order to understand, because they said in order to understand the message, how do I understand the message? By intellect. So intellect is first, comes before. So it's the first thing is intellect. So that's why it comes before revelation, because if you don't have the brain, you can't tackle the revelation. But the problem here is that we say, okay, you are right in one part and you are wrong in another part. You are right in, yes, we have to use our brain in order to understand, but we have to understand it through the tools that revelation gave us. We use the brain to go through the tools that Quran gave us, not through the tools that your brain is giving you. Because using the tools that you think your brain is given to you is the trick. It's going to take you astray, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't put in the brain tools to understand the major facts of universe. He didn't do that. It's not like we said. So, yes, we use our brain in order to look at ayatullah, and you know, قل سيروا في الأرض فانظروا كيف بدأ الخلق. We do this. وسخر السحاب الثقال. All the ayat that Allah we talked about in al-Rububiyyah. What do we use in order to understand? We use our brain. But what are we using it? What are we casting this brain? What is the tool? The tool is the ayat itself. So we use our intellect that Allah gave us, and He actually gave us enough to understand this ayat. And through the system, He put it in Quran and Sunnah. What the Mu'tazila did was that they said, no, we are going to ignore the revelation altogether in the beginning, and we are going to try to understand through logic, like in order to refute Aristotle's logic. We are going to use his tools, and we're going to show that it's wrong, and hence they created what they called ilm al-kalam and this kind of thing. I don't remember if we had an example. So this was the thing they did, and then they said, oh, when they did that, when they went through this process, their brain actually introduced to them some problems. They introduced them to them some problems in Asma wa Sifat, because like we said, what are they using? They're using their brain. Are they using it with the methodology and the tools of the revelation in order to understand? No, they said, let's take in everything through intellect, and then let's leave revelation second to that. So when they go through this process, that process, what happened? They started to say, oh, how can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have haya? Haya is, is a attribute of humans. So how can he has haya? How can he has ilm? If we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ilm, has knowledge, then there is knowledge that existed with him, and there is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these two, knowledge and Allah, so these are a double. So this is not Tawheed. So as if knowledge is a being on its own. They say, but knowledge exists. It's a being. It's there. So we can't say that. So and went through that with all so they said he can't have haya. He can't have huwa hay. He is alive, but without haya, without living. He is knowledgeable, but without knowledge. There is no knowledge, because if we say there is knowledge, then the knowledge exists with him. Then this is not. That's why they call themselves Ahl Tawheed, because they think that they took away the shirk of having knowledge, having haya, and they thought that these are separate existences. So this is where the problem started. Is that they try to confront the major facts of the universe, which is, and the measure of the measure is the names of attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who is he? What is he? Subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how can we do that? There is no way except through the revelation. Yes, like we said, we use the tool. We use the piece Allah gave us, which is the intellect, but we use it through the tool Allah gave us, which is the revelation, the book, the messages. Without these two together, we cannot understand. So what did they do? What did they do with this? Some said, well, Mu'tazila came and they say we can't understand the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as it came in Quran, not directly. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. وَكَلَّمَ اللَّهُ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا. So Allah يتكلم. كلم Allah. They said, no. If you say that, then Allah has attributes like human beings. So Allah لم يكلم Musa. So they actually said, they came up with a concept called the inner talk. الكلام النفسي. الكلام النفسي. You know when you talk to yourself without hearing, without saying, الكلام النفسي. So they say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يتكلم كلام نفسي. It doesn't exist actually. It's inside. They came up with this meaning of الكلام one way. So they created something. They used what they call a ta'wil. They said we have to make ta'wil. That's why they call them Ahl al-Ta'wil. Ta'wil, that's where we have to talk about ta'wil and the meanings of ta'wil, because this is relevant to whatever happened after that, because this is how it started. Of course, we have to, when we study sects, you will read in detail what every sect, how did it deal. Like al-Mu'tazila, when they said Allah doesn't have haya, doesn't have knowledge, doesn't have qudra. Because again, Qudra means there is Qudra separate and there is Allah separate. So he is Qadir. So أثبتوا الاسم, they approve the name but not the attribute itself. It's kind of, that's what happens when you rely on. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He أثبت القدرة and he said in the ayat, إن الله على كل شيء قدير فهو قدير. So he has قدرة. It's a given. And like Ahl Sunnah said, when you attribute some merit to a being, you are actually making him more higher than when you take it away from him. When you say somebody is qadir and has qudra, it's higher than you say he's qadir only, because you're adding. So that's what I sort of said, why you take it away? Because if I come and say, but I have another ilah who is qadir and have qudra, what do you think? Who is better? The one who is qadir and has qudra. So and the approach to qudra is not the approach that it is a separate entity, and if you put it like this, it's shirk and stuff. Our approach, our Ahl Sunnah, our Sahaba, when they hear the Quran, they didn't look at it this way. It's a weird way to look at it. It came from, like we said, it came from studying the philosophy, the Western, the Greek philosophy and stuff. So that's why they're brilliant. So they made what they call Tawheed. They first make ta'til, because ta'til means to nullify something. So if you nullify the name, يعطله, it's not working, it doesn't work. So that's why they call it Mu'tazila or Mu'attila, these are names, Ahl al-Ta'wil, because they made Ta'wil. But Ta'wil is, we have to go over Ta'wil because it is a wide thing, and we have to understand. So inshallah we will talk about the subject of Ta'wil in the next session, because like Ta'wil used to, there are three meanings of Ta'wil in our Islamic thought and Islamic writing. Two are related to Salaf, and one that is more like later, maybe in the late 2nd century, that appeared, and it actually related to whatever the Mu'tazila and Ash'ari did. So we will go over these three types and examples of them and how to understand it. Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.